Okay, as I mentioned, the ASEAN Cosmetic Directive, 20 over years ago, it's kind of shining example of harmonization, yeah? All the 10 states, well, now going to be 11 because East Timor is in the process of joining. So you can see here the directive as all those regulations that 10 states, East Timor is joining, and largely very, very similar principles and regulations based on the EU. Okay, and here's basically the 10 states pretty much use that. I'm not going to go through all of that, but I want to emphasize again that is also what we see in ASEAN. Remember I mentioned for those very classification-driven ban and restriction in EU, that the industry has worked very closely with the ASEAN. Here you can see the ACSB, the ASEAN Cosmetic Scientific Board. A lot of discussions that's a pretty good platform between the industry and the ASEAN government authorities, the 10 states, to discuss the things. So there is basically discussions on how to review that under the ASEAN. Does not have to be a very rush to a copy and paste of any ban and restrictions under the EU regulation. So again, we could see in this part of the world, in Asia Pacific, depends on which government, there has been some good discussions between industry and the governments. Yeah. I'm going to spend the last 4 or 5 minutes on the fragrance, because on IFRA standard, it is relevant to the regulation. Please don't think it's just an industry voluntary standard. Yeah? We have an IFRA transparency list that is sort of looked upon. It's basically a list of ingredients, positive list. Well, cannot take it strictly as a positive list, but it's a list of ingredients that the perfumers, so you can smell the sensories, and it's the perfumers that they use to generate the various perfumes that you could smell in your shampoos, in your conditioner, in your detergent, in your floor cleaner, in your soap, in your cosmetics, in everything. Yeah, yeah, and that's that. Here's our code of practice. I want to talk a little bit about IFRA standard because I think my peers here some of them talked a little bit about the industry voluntary standard. The IFRA was established in 1973, and we came up from an industry association, a voluntary industry standard, in order to protect the integrity and safety of fragrance. As we could say, fragrance is used so widely. It's not just the fine fragrance, it's used in so many day-to-day products. Yeah? So you can see here's the setting process. There is a joint reference, that's a research institute of fragrance materials. They are even older than IFRA. They have an independent scientific expert review board that they review the ingredients of fragrance. And with that, you could see after so many steps to have an IFRA standard. The standard basically, as you can see, the standard basically say, yes, if there is any concern now, only 260-something standards at this moment. Later this year, in the fourth quarter this year, there will be some more fluorocoumarin. So these standards basically say what is allowed leave-on, what is allowed rinse-off, what is allowed using different, depends on the human body exposure. For example, here's what the IFRA standard is, yeah? Application to the scalp, to the face, lips, everywhere, and then, based on this kind of exposure models, they set up the standards. What is can leave on, what is could be used in that kind of exposure. So this is what the standard is about. So 263 standards, that means 263 chemical ingredients that is in the standards. People will say, okay, there's thousands of chemicals in fragrance. Why some of them don't have the standard? They don't have the standard means they're quite okay, safe to be used as of now based on their exposure. So not everything has to have a standard. The standard is established to protect the safety of certain fragrance ingredient usage. Yeah. So you can see the standards have what is prohibited, what is restricted, and the specification of them. Yeah, so it's basically for the placing the safe products on the market, because this is really to consumers, to all of us, day-to-day usage. So that's the IFRA standard. So people will be asking, okay, you talked a lot about your industry association's self-voluntary standards, and who cares? The answer is yes, meaning the standard since 1970-something has gained such a high scientific reputation. Many of the worldwide regulatory authority have accepted that, yeah, as their regulation. Once it become adopted in their regulation, that is not just industry voluntary standards anymore. It has become a regulation. So you could see the various countries, yeah, China, ASEAN, EU Cosmetic Directive, New Zealand, in Argentina, Brazil, their cosmetic regulation all adopted the IFRA standard. So that is a high recognition of our voluntary industry standard that became such a high level of competency.